The house telephone rang, an old-fashioned device that was now only used by a handful of people to reach Suri. Her mother had used it every day, but since her death the thing had barely made a sound. Its sharp ringing cut through the silence of the manor. Suri frowned. She had just stepped beneath the shower when the sound reached her. Outside, it was unbearably hot. It had taken a few days, but eventually even the thick walls of the manor house had lost the battle. The coolness the building had held onto for months had disappeared, and the warmth had slowly crept inside. When the heatwave had started, she had still had all sorts of plans. Things she needed to arrange, appointments she needed to make, work that needed to be done. Now those thoughts had evaporated. Nothing seemed truly important anymore. Heat slowed time. Lovely, she thought. The phone continued ringing. Suri quickly stepped out of the shower and ran down the stairs, naked and still dripping wet. For a moment she enjoyed the cool air against her skin as she hurried downstairs, but the feeling disappeared quickly. She picked up. "Hello, good evening, Aunt." The voice on the other end made all the warmth disappear from her body. Suuz, the daughter of her oldest brother Darius, never called. She got along well with her niece. They were only 10 years apart and had always shared a special bond. Suuz was funny, sharp, and sometimes wonderfully stubborn. Suri loved her. Secretly, she even dared to admit that Suuz was her favorite niece. They sent each other messages from time to time, usually weekly. Ridiculous videos, nonsense comments, and small updates about their lives. They saw each other 3 or 4 times a year, but calling? No. Suuz never did that. "Suzette?" Suri asked carefully. "Yes." A short silence followed. Not the kind of silence where someone was searching for words. It was a strange silence, as if Suuz was waiting for Suri to continue speaking. "Is everything all right?" Suri asked. "No." The answer came immediately. "No, everything is not all right." Suri felt her heartbeat quicken. What happened? On the other end she heard nothing. No voices, no traffic, and no sounds coming from the room. Enli, the calm breathing of her niece. "I'm here with Elin," Suuz said, "so I'm safe." A short pause. "But the police have just been here." Suri held her breath. "My parents are dead." The words came calmly, too calmly. Suuz, she did not know what to say. There were moments when language failed. This was clearly one of them. "Your brother," her voice broke slightly. "Your brother is dead." A silence. "And Mum." For a moment Suri heard only the soft hum of the ventilation above her. "What?" "My parents were murdered last night." Suri closed her eyes. Darius, her oldest brother, the man who had always acted as if nothing in the world could break him. And Penelope, his wife. "Suuz," she swallowed. "How do you know that?" "That's what I said. The police have just been here. They've already left." "Of course." Suri suddenly felt ridiculous. "And you are—" She stopped. "All right." Terrified? Broken? Destroyed? No word seemed right. "How are you?" "Like I said," Suuz replied. "I'm with Elin." Suri blinked slowly. "Yes." But that was not an answer to her question. "Are you hurt?" "No. I'm fine." A short silence. "I wasn't there when it happened." The answers were so bare, almost like she was giving a report. Suri lowered herself onto the bottom step of the staircase. The telephone cord pulled slightly against her arm, and the cool wood beneath her skin felt strangely comforting against her overheated body. "Suuz, sweetheart, what exactly happened?" "They don't know yet." "Who?" "The police." "And what did they say?" "That the situation is too complicated." A small pause. "Or too confronting." That was the word they used. Suri closed her eyes. Too confronting. She did not want to know what they meant by that. "They don't want me going to the house tonight. Tomorrow at 8 I'm going." "I'll come too." There was silence on the other end. Suri stared into the dark hallway before her. It was not a simple journey. She lived in Florenza, in the south inland of Terran, where summers were long and brutal. Darius's home was in Skirt, in the north of the country, high in the interior mountains where temperatures were almost always lower and winters could be harsh. The distance was enormous. Even with the fastest connections, the journey took more than a day. But that did not matter. Not now. "I'll come as soon as I can." She hesitated. "How is Charlotte?" The answer came immediately. "I know she's still alive." Suri froze. What? My sister is alive. Suuz, she was there I think when it happened. But she left. How do you know that? I just know. There was no uncertainty in her voice. No hope. No despair. Only certainty. She isn't dead, Aunt. A short silence. She isn't dead. Have you spoken to her? No. Seen her? No. Then I don't understand how you can know that. Again, silence. Because I know. Suri tightened her fingers around the phone. That answer suited Suuz. Her niece had always been unusually good at knowing things, not in the way people claim to have a sixth sense, not a vague feeling or a lucky guess. She simply knew things without anyone telling her how she knew. It was in their bloodline, the same bloodline that had once given their family its influence. House Vandette had not become powerful through wealth or land alone. Their name carried an older inheritance, the Fae. Some families still carried traces of those ancient gifts. And Suri knew that Suuz was exceptionally gifted. But this was different. For the first time, Suri was not wondering what Suuz knew. She was wondering what Suuz felt. Suuz? Yes? How are you? Another silence followed. I'm functioning. Suri felt her stomach tighten. That's not what I asked. I know. The words came softly. But I don't know what else you want to know. Suri remained silent for a moment. You shouldn't be alone tonight. I'm not. I'm staying here with Ilin. Good. Suri looked towards the dark hallway in front of her. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Probably sometime in the late afternoon. Good. And then Suuz ended the call. Suri remained seated on the bottom step for a long time after Suuz ended the call. First her father, then her mother, and now Darius. Dead. Eventually she got to her feet. The journey to Skirt would take more than a day, even with the fastest connections. If she wanted to leave at first light, she had a great deal to arrange. She climbed the stairs again. The manor house had once been built to impress. High ceilings, enormous windows, and clean lines that reflected the wealth of House Vandette. It had become a modern manor, completely renovated with smooth natural stone, dark metal details, and carefully selected designer furniture. But the house had always possessed two faces. Downstairs had been her mother's domain, or at least the version of the family she wished the outside world to see. The marble floors, the carefully chosen artwork, the furniture positioned with almost military precision. Everything had been intended to remind visitors of the status House Vandette possessed. Her father had never cared much for those things. He had wanted the house to feel lived in. That was why the upper floor had always been different. Upstairs, books were stacked in chaotic piles, doors were left open, rooms filled with objects no interior designer would ever have approved of. Upstairs the family lived, downstairs they presented themselves. Suri paused in the doorway of her bedroom. For a moment she simply looked around. 5 months. Only 5 months had passed since her mother's funeral. She opened her wardrobe and pulled out a suitcase. As she did, memories crept back. It had been a major event for the city of Florenza. God, it had been a major Terran event. Even the royal family had made an appearance. Terran was a large country, a long, stretched-out extension of the continent of Verzetia. It had long coastlines with a pleasant maritime climate, but in the southern inland regions, summers could become mercilessly hot, just as they did in the old city of Florenza. Terran was officially a kingdom with an elected government, but true power did not rest with Parliament and the government alone. Everyone knew that true power rested with the crown and the great noble houses. King Cyrus and Queen Shireen ruled Terran. They were said to be the strongest Fae on the continent, though no one could say how many centuries they had lived. As far as history remembered, they and their 6 children alone still possessed enough pure Fae blood to remain what their ancestors had once been, true Fae, blessed with extraordinary longevity and gifts undiminished by time. The noble houses came after them. Each traced its lineage back to the ancient Fae, and had inherited a gift of its own, though none possessed the full strength their forebears once commanded. Originally, the inland regions were dominated by House Vandette, House Fazir, and House Zorm. In the north stood House Agathos. In the far southeast were House Zelvera and House Brigant. Over the past 50 years, however, these families had gradually become more dispersed. Like Darius and Penelope had moved north. Along the western and eastern coasts were the smaller houses, each with their own local influence. Suri was a daughter of House Vandette, and unmarried and childless, much to the delight of the local press and the national gossip magazines. She had 4 brothers, Darius, Rostam, and the twins, Siavash and Arash Jr. They all had their own enormous manor houses scattered throughout the vast inland regions. They all had their beautiful, wealthy wives, children, and all of them had a persistent lack of time. As the youngest and only daughter, Suri had always felt that it was her responsibility to be there for her parents. She had never found love, not despite her mother's repeated attempts to match her with suitable, wealthy men, and she was hardly an unattractive woman. She had long reddish-brown curls and, according to one man who had once been interested in her, sparkling green eyes and an excellent arse. There had even been a ball organized once. The newspapers had feasted on it for weeks, but it had all come to nothing. "Leave the girl alone," her father had repeatedly told her mother, and when he died, her mother had finally taken those words to heart, either because she had given up and no longer believed it would happen for a 31-year-old woman, or because she simply no longer cared, or both. Her father had been everything to her mother. Arash Darius Vandette had been a hard man in the eyes of the outside world, but within his family he had been a warm and loving husband and father. His death had left an enormous emptiness behind. A year later, her mother had died in her sleep. Of a broken heart, the newspapers had written, and for once Suri had agreed with them. The funeral had taken place at the old cemetery north of Florenza, where many prominent families buried their dead. House Vandette even had its own tomb there, a stone monument where generations of family members had found their final resting place. The priest had stood before the gathered crowd and delivered a long, dull speech about her mother's life and significance to the family, to Florenza and even, which Suri found excessive, all of Tehran. Around them stood important people, close friends and distant relatives. Some had loved her mother, others seemed present simply because they were expected to be. That had always been the burden of belonging to one of the great houses. A death was never only a personal loss, it was an event. Her mother had understood that better than anyone. "When I go, children, make it grand," she had said during the last Christmas. Everything for the family's reputation. Her brothers had stood rigidly beside each other during the ceremony, their wives dressed in black and grey. Penelope had dabbed at her eyes with a grey handkerchief, despite never having truly gotten along with her mother-in-law. Suuz and Charlotte had both been visibly affected by the death of their grandmother. Her brothers had remained composed, Suri had not. She had allowed her tears to flow freely. She had cried for the mother with whom she could endlessly argue about faith, duty, and men, for the woman who had loved her father with all her heart, for the mother who had been strict, yet still checked on her every evening, hugged her, laughed at her jokes and squeezed her hand during long evenings filled with dull, important guests. A mother who had cared for her, and who had always, in her own way, wanted the best for her. She had not even been embarrassed when she filled yet another handkerchief with tears, while the priest continued speaking. Somewhere beyond it, she could hear the soft clicking of cameras. The photographers had officially not been allowed onto the grounds, but they had positioned themselves outside the boundaries of the cemetery. With their telephoto lenses, they had still had an excellent view of the spectacle. The newspapers and magazines had published photographs for weeks afterwards. Suri crying, Suri with her red, swollen eyes, Suri refusing to hide her grief, Suri who had remained so wonderfully herself. She had felt miserable in the days that followed and tortured herself by repeatedly scrolling through articles and gossip columns about her pain and hopelessness. Suri, 31, now alone in the enormous family estate. Which strong shoulder does Suri have left to cry on? She barely remembered anything else from that day, not her brother's speeches and not the conversations afterwards, and certainly not the priest's comforting words. Yet one memory remained vivid: the coffin, slowly carried towards the tomb, to the place where her mother would rest beside her father, finally together.